Hi, I'm Lenise Brothers, a registered nutritionist, women's health, hormone, and menstrual cycle coach, and the founder of Eat, Love, Move, a nutrition and well-being practice. This is the Period Story Podcast, where in each episode, I sit down with a guest to talk about their period story. We get behind some of the myths and misconceptions about periods and so much more. Now, on to today's guest. On today's show, we have Jen Wright, who is a cyclical living mentor. She supports creatives working with their natural rhythms, menstrual, lunar, and seasonal, as they build their small businesses. I really love this conversation. We talked about the importance of rest, the power of working with your menstrual cycle, and of course, Jen shared her own period story. Jen has just launched Life Aligned, a 3-month productivity and wellness journal. I can't wait to get my copy. And if you're interested, click the link in the show notes to find out more. I hope you enjoy today's show. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Lenise.
Let's start off by getting into the story of your very first period. Can you share with us what happened?
Yeah, it was, well, I don't really remember all that much about it, which is strange considering how much time I spent thinking about my period in my adult life. I think I was about 13 or 14. I know I was in high school, and all I really remember about it is that I came out of the bathroom and into my mum's room and said, I think I've got my period. And she went, oh God, and this kind of like it was a kind of happy sound, but it also sounded a little bit bereft, which I feel like I understand a bit more now that I'm a mother myself. Yeah, and other than that, I remember that she gave me pads to use, but yeah, otherwise I don't really remember anything about the blood or cramps or any kind of embarrassment around it. But I do remember later on, when I was in high school, remembering the embarrassment around it and the shame and I hope that no one sees anything. Like, don't, flush the toilet twice and hide everything at the bottom of the bin. And the pads were so thick back then. The idea that other girls could hear it as I was walking along the corridor or things like that. And just always feeling like it had to be this very secret, hidden thing.
Why do you think that you developed this shame and embarrassment?
I don't know, because I remember other girls at school talking about it, almost kind of showing off about it and doing a little kind of skit around it and making the others laugh. But I also remember friends of mine telling stories of, I remember one girl saying that she was at her friend's house sitting on their sofa, and when she stood up there was blood on the sofa, and so she quickly wiped it on her hand and went, oh no, I've cut my hand, and just ran out of the house and didn't look back. And this idea that it had to be hidden, and I don't think I was explicitly given that message at home. I remember my mum talking about it with me, but I also grew up in a house with 3 older brothers. So I feel that, it was always quite a private thing between me and my mum, and just between me and my friends, and it wasn't really talked about in the rest of the house for fear of being made fun of these, rather loud older brothers.
Do you feel that you carry any shame and embarrassment now?
No. On the contrary, I think I'm probably a little bit too open about it now, to the point where a little while ago, I think I finally found my boundary with it when I was on a Zoom call with my daughters and their classmates. They're in nursery, and we arranged like a group Zoom call, as obviously they've all been on lockdown. And one of my girls announced that I'd had blood in my pants that morning really loudly to the whole, and I was like, oh no, and I kind of tried to like pass it off, because it was like this whole group of parents, mums and dads and things. So I was like, yep, I think I finally found my boundary with it, actually.
So was it one of those situations where you just kind of like, oh yeah, kind of explain it away?
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, no, that's not yet. That's anyway. So, where, as I was saying, it just kind of changed the subject. I think there was so much noise going on with kids screaming and chatting. I don't think anyone heard anyway. So, um,
yeah, a nursery Zoom call. I could just imagine the chaos of that.
yeah.
I want to go back to the story of when you started your period. So you said that your mom, she was fine, but she was a little bit bereft, perhaps because it was a transition from your girlhood into through to now puberty. How did you learn about what was happening to you?
Do you know, I honestly, I honestly don't really remember much. I remember classes at school, I think very, very brief lesson on what would be happening in our bodies. And I was talking to my mum about this a while ago when I knew I was going to be coming onto the podcast and saying, do you remember having that conversation with me? And she doesn't, and I don't remember it either. But I'm sure that we must have. But yeah, unfortunately, yeah, I don't remember it. And I remember talking to my peers about it at school later after we'd already started and discussing the products that we used. And my friends were always trying to convince me to use tampons because I was just using pads. And it's funny, but even from that kind of that early age and that early stage on the menstrual journey, I felt like my body wants it to come out. I don't want to block it in. And it just seemed really odd to me to try and stop it from coming out. It was like, if my body is trying to expel something, then surely I'm better to just catch it when it's already come out. So I was just, I couldn't be convinced. And I remember them making fun of me and like saying that I wasn't really a woman and I wasn't really grown up for it. And I was just kind of steadfast on, no, that's not right for me.
They said you weren't really a woman because you didn't want to use tampons.
Yeah, it was seen as like the when you get your first period you use pads, but when you're really like grown up and really having periods, then you use the grown up woman's product, which is the tampon, which again just feels like it's more hiding it away, you know. So yeah, I was pretty belligerent about that.
Yeah, but that's interesting that you knew your body so well at that point, and you could connect this feeling of the blood wants to come out with the need to use pads instead of tampons. That I find that fascinating. I've never heard anyone express it like that before.
Oh, okay, good.
And so do you still use pads?
I now use period pants.
Oh, okay.
But yes, I was using pads up until a couple of years ago when I discovered period pants, and then again just haven't looked back. It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing. And so much less waste as well, because I've been trying to go plastic free in so many areas of my life. But again, when I was out to dinner with a group of mum friends and talked about how I just discovered period pants, and isn't this amazing? And just the looks of horror on everyone's faces. But what? Then you have to then what? You have to rinse them out. You have to touch the blood, and everyone seemed totally horrified by this idea. And I was like, yeah, guys, it's just blood. It's it's completely natural. But yes, they didn't seem quite on board with it. Well, I was very excited.
It's so interesting, especially that you had that interaction with a group of moms, because when you become a parent, you become very connected with or familiar with fluids, bodily fluids.
Whether you want to or not.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like that blood is still seen as like kind of the last frontier, and that it provoked those reactions.
Yeah.
And I really wonder, when did we become so afraid of our own blood? You know, when does that start? And
Well, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because, and again, it's not just any blood, it's just period blood that is still seen as dirty. And that message is given to us from such a young age and throughout our lives, with the simple fact that they're called feminine hygiene products and called sanitary towels. And everything makes it sound like, oh, that area is dirty and what you're dealing with is dirty and needs to be cleaned up. And it's just this subliminal message that's constantly told to us that, yeah, as you say, even after becoming parents, when we're basically either covered in jam or poo, we're still like worried about talking about period blood. It's yeah, it's crazy.
So you've talked about how you bound your boundary when it comes to
Yeah.
talking about periods. But I want to ask you, when did you start to become more open in terms of talking about your period? Because you described when you were a teenager this shame and embarrassment. When did things change?
I think probably on my fertility journey, things had to change because I was discussing with so many different doctors and consultants. So it took us about 3 years to get pregnant. And again, I kind of resisted intervention for a while. I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome when I was in my early 20s and told that it would be very difficult to get pregnant. And added to that, I had been on the contraceptive pill on and off since I was 15 years old, which obviously didn't help matters either. But when I was off the pill and we were actively trying for a baby, I was going in and out of all these different kind of doctors' appointments. And so that was when I started to get to know my very irregular cycle. So sorry, going back a little bit, when I was still a teenager, after my period arrived, I would only have maybe one or two a year. So they were still very rare for me, and it stayed rare for a couple of years when I went to the doctor and said that everything's still very irregular. And I remember that they were very heavy when they did come. And so no other questions were asked. I was just dropped straight onto the contraceptive pill, and I stayed on it for 6 years. And it's only as an adult that I've learned that actually more questions should be asked to find kind of the underlying issues, and also that it's quite normal as a teenager for your periods not to regulate until you're older, but we're not really given a chance before we're given the contraceptive pill. I've lost my train of thought now.
Go back to what you were saying about the pill and talk a bit more about why you came off it, because you started at 15 and then you came off. You were on it for 6 years, so you came off when you were 21. What made you decide to come off the pill?
So I think a number of reasons. I had been quite miserable and quite moody throughout my later teenage years, which again, I think everyone put down to adolescence. I put it down to my own adolescence and, boy problems and things as well. But actually looking back, I do wonder whether it was something to do with that, because when I came off the pill, things did change for me emotionally over a couple of years. I found myself in quite a toxic relationship, and it was kind of like I saw sense a little bit, and like something in me woke up, and I found my way out of that relationship, fortunately. And I then went back on the pill, again feeling like everything's still irregular. If I don't want to keep going out and being surprised by my period arriving, like when I'm out and about, then the only option for me is to go on the pill. So I went back on the pill for a few years, and then, as I say, my husband and I wanted to try for a baby, and so I only came off the pill like literally a few months before we actively started trying. So I started going to different appointments where they started to tell me all of the options for me, which all sounded just like something that I didn't want. And I was adamant with my husband from the beginning that I wouldn't want to go down the IVF route. If things were difficult for us for years, I wouldn't want to go down the IVF route. And again, it kind of comes back to that not wanting to do the opposite of what my body wanted to do. As if my body is telling me that it's not ready for whatever reason, or it's not doing it for whatever reason, then I need to sort out my body, not force it to do something it doesn't want to do. And that was just what felt right to me personally. So before I tried any of the options that the doctors were offering me, because I was going back for blood tests and hormone levels and all that, and while I was having that, I went to acupuncture and started taking Chinese herbs and things, and tried that for about 6 months, I believe. But unfortunately, it didn't seem to be having the right effect. If anything, I felt actually a little bit poorly over the months that I was taking the Chinese herbs, and my acupuncturist was so wonderful, and she was just like, I think that you're just very sensitive to this style of intervention, and maybe it's time to try something else. And I was like, okay, I'll try something else. And so ended up taking a drug called Clomid, which was to kind of force ovulation. And again, they said that I needed to take it when I started my period. And obviously, as my period was still only coming once or twice a year, they offered me progesterone to bring on a fake bleed. And again, I was like, I'm not taking that, because to bring on a fake bleed, how is that going to help me get pregnant? That's nothing to do with my natural cycle. So I said, well, I'm just going to wait. It might take a few months, but I'll wait until my period actually arrives. Unfortunately, just about 6 weeks later, my period did arrive. So I took the Clomid and fell pregnant with twins, which was a bit of a shock. So my body obviously was just ready to wake up at that point, I think. Yes, and then obviously no menstrual cycle while pregnant, and at the beginning I had my girls, I was expressing and attempted to breastfeed, and it didn't work for me with the two. They were premature and both had tongue tie, and it turned out quite serious dietary issues with one of my daughters as well, and so ended up switching to formula. And so quite early on my period returned, and I just remember being furious about it, just like I waited so many years for my menstrual cycle to sort itself out, and now at this point where I don't need to ovulate and I don't want to have more babies, now it's suddenly going to start turning up like clockwork. And it started coming more and more regularly and more frequently, almost as if my body had gone, I understand what I'm supposed to do now. Okay, yes, I'm going to kick it into gear.
Your story is so interesting because you ostensibly had PCOS, but because your periods were so irregular when you were a teenager, which is actually really common, that then you started taking the pill, which suppresses ovulation, came off the pill, went back on it again, and then came off the pill, then had to take a drug to stimulate ovulation.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And then you got pregnant and gave birth, and your periods, your menstrual cycle resolved itself.
Yeah.
And so it's really fascinating how quick the doctors were to put you on the pill when you were 15, when perhaps, hindsight being 2020, it may have been better to just wait to see what would have happened naturally to your body.
Yeah, completely. And I just wish I'd known then what I know now, because I don't believe I would have taken the pill at all. And yes, maybe I wouldn't have spent most of my life thinking, I have hugely irregular periods, because the fact that they're regular now I mean, they are every kind of 35, 36 days usually, but that's still regular. I can still plan around it and I can still track it. Maybe that's what would have happened anyway if I just let my body kind of ease itself into it, rather than going, yep, you're not doing the right thing, I'm going to fill you with drugs. And then again, years later going, yep, you're not doing the right thing, I'm going to fill you with drugs. And again, it wasn't raised when I was talking to consultants about all the different things they were offering me to help me get pregnant. It was never really addressed, the fact that I'd been on the contraceptive pill for that many years. It was never, I was told kind of, oh, well, you only came off such and such time ago, so you need to give your body time to regulate itself. But it was, otherwise, that was it. It was never mentioned again.
You said something interesting about you were going to go on the Clomid, but you were uncertain because you felt like, but prior to that, you didn't feel like your body was ready to go on that. You wanted to find another way. And that's, again, then another example that you've mentioned where you've really been able to tune into your body and been able to listen. And it's fascinating because that's something that I'm starting to see more and more women being able to kind of start to listen to their bodies and listen to what their bodies are telling, and actually respond to that, not just hear it and then just kind of carry on. How have you continued to develop that kind of connection with what your body's telling you?
Early last year, I was talking with a friend, and she recommended the book Period Power to me. And I think from reading that, it was just like a mind-blowing moment, learning all of these facts about my body and my hormones, and just how much is affected by hormones, because we still talk about it as if it's just we get kind of emotional and pain for a week, and then we bleed for a week, and that's it. And the rest of the time, we're not on our period, and that's it. But actually, the cycle is constant. We are always on this cycle of different hormones flowing through our body. So, of course, that's going to affect us every day in a different way. Everything that I've learnt from Period Power and my own fertility journey. And I then became like a voracious reader of anything that was about the menstrual cycle, and also reading, and I mentioned to you before, How the Pill Changes Everything by Sarah Hill, which was fascinating, and gives you so much more insight into everything that the hormones do. Because again, you think of it all just affecting your uterus basically, and actually it's all these signals from the brain, and they affect your entire body, and your mind. So yes, I've just been kind of trying to bring that learning into my day-to-day life, and then into my mentoring work as well. So when I started mentoring women back in 2018, I already was very adamant with them when we were talking about their kind of their to-do lists and their ideas and everything they wanted to do. Something that was always key for me to bring up in the conversation was, okay, but when are you resting? When are you going to do something fun for you? When are you creating just for the sake of creating? And how frequently the answer was just, oh no, I don't have time to do that, or no, I hadn't even considered that. How could I possibly do that? I'm already like running on empty. It's like, well, yes, you've just answered your own question. If you rest and give yourself a chance to just sit and breathe, then the ideas that you feel blocked around will flow more easily and give your body a chance to recoup. And I guess I've just now increased those questions with my clients, and we work them around the menstrual cycle. So I was talking to a client a couple of days ago, and she was laying out all of this work that she wants to get done over the next few weeks. and saying, yeah, it feels manageable. I've got this lot of stuff here and this lot of stuff here. And I was like, okay, but when is your bleed due? Aren't you due soon? She was like, oh yeah, I'm actually due the day of that deadline. Maybe I should shift that, and kind of trying to bring that consideration into our work, because it does affect us. And I think a lot of women still fight that, saying, no, I am in control. I say that I need to do these things and I will get on and do it. And it's like, well, you are your body. And if your body is saying that it's time to rest, then listen to your body, rest, and you will be so much more productive and feel so much brighter and more positive for having that rest. And I've been trying to practice what I preach for the most part.
Why do you think we're so resistant to rest?
Oh, the patriarchy. I think we're just indoctrinated with this belief that we have to be busy. We have to be busy all the time to really be seen as contributing and really being seen as being productive. And I'm a victim of that myself. I had a very busy, very stressful office job for years. And even when I started working for myself, I ran a stationery brand for a few years. I just still felt like if I wasn't working all the hours, then how could I possibly ever be successful? And how would people take me seriously? And it's just a one-way ticket to burnout, and you don't do your best work in that space. So it's mad that we leave these jobs going, oh, I don't want to be in the rat race, I want to start my own business. And then we work harder for ourselves than we would ever accept working for somebody else. And it's this old kind of patriarchal view of, I must work the same every day, day in, day out, must make money, must, just keep going no matter what. So
it's interesting what you're saying about this patriarchy and productivity and needing to work harder for yourself. Because I could completely relate to all of it. I'm actually on day 3 of my period right now, and so Saturday I usually have lots of stuff to do in the morning, but for whatever reason things got cancelled out of my diary. So all of a sudden I had all of this free time. My husband and son were out of the house, off to play football. And I said to myself, why don't you just read and rest? I had a book that I wanted to really get into. It was a fiction book, which I love reading fiction and I don't read enough of it. And I was like, just lay in bed. You don't feel good. You're tired. Just lay down and read. And there was so much resistance to it. I kept looking over at my laptop and thinking, maybe I should just do this. No, read. Maybe I should. And in the end, I actually finished the whole book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm a fast reader. So I read the whole book and I felt so much better by the end of the day. And it was just a reminder, firstly, practice what you preach. And secondly, that rest is so important. Rest is like it feels revolutionary at times.
Yeah, it does. And it's like you say, you're looking around going, oh, well, maybe I should do that first. Almost like you have to earn this right to then sit down and read your book. And it's like, you've already earned it.
Yeah.
Here is your permanent permission slip. When you feel tired, it is a message from your body to sit your butt down and just rest. And it's like we listen to all of these other messages from our body, like just the simple case of the circadian rhythm of just, okay, it's nighttime, I'm tired, I'm going to go to sleep. And obviously there are a few people that will still go, no, I will stay awake for as long as humanly possible and fight against that. But the average person will accept, I'm tired, I'm going to go to sleep. And yet we're like, oh, I really feel like I need a rest, or I better do all of the housework and answer all of my emails and just, sort all of this out first. It's like, no, just sit down, woman.
Yeah. I want to talk more about the mentoring work that you do and how you've managed to tie in the ebbs and flow of the menstrual cycle around that. Talk a little bit more about how you educate your clients about that and whether there's any resistance they have to incorporating that into the way that they work.
So, yeah, I don't think I've actually encountered any resistance with my clients, which has been brilliant, other than kind of they're not being aware of how much it affects at the beginning when we start talking about it, to, a mere few weeks later or a month later going, I can't believe that now I've been tracking it. I can see exactly where it is that I should be, resting, or where I should be planning that deadline. And that's such a good way of looking at it, rather than resisting this idea that you're not in control. It's taking control of it and going, right, I'm gonna track my cycle so I can plan for my next one, and know that, oh, there's that networking event that week that I'd really like to go to. Oh God, I'm going to be on day 28 or day 1, and I'm really not going to feel like talking to people, and I'm going to mess up all my words. But there's this networking event that falls around ovulation, where I'm going to be really confident and feeling sexy, and I'm going to go and talk to everyone and sell them what I do. And just being able to plan that way is hugely empowering and liberating. And I did it myself the first time, kind of end of last year. I was like, okay, I'm actually going to put this theory into practice for myself. And I booked my first professional photo shoot, going and getting some photos taken for my website. And she offered me some dates, and I was like, oh great, that date falls on kind of as the moon is becoming full, and I'll get into the lunar phases as well. And just as I'm coming up to ovulation, so I'm going to be feeling more confident, more energetic, a little bit more playful. I felt great, something that would usually fill me with so much dread. And I had to get up the early hours, and it was a freezing cold day, and travel, and there were train delays. I had to go up north. And usually I'd be just a ball of stress by the time I got there, but I was still just so excited. And it was a brilliant, brilliant day. And I think that if I'd booked that a couple of weeks later or earlier, when I was in the middle of my period or something, it would have been a completely different experience. Yeah.
Can you talk a bit more about lunar phases? So you have a brilliant Facebook group for anyone who's listening. I'll put it in the show notes. It's called Life Aligned. Yeah. And you talk about not only menstrual cycle tracking and what that can bring to you in terms of work and life, but you also talk about the moon phases. I don't know a huge amount about it, so I'd love to hear more from you about what it's all about.
Sure. So because the group stemmed from my desire to kind of bring what I was learning to a wider audience, because obviously I work one-on-one with people, but I started the group just to see kind of how it would work in a group setting, talking about cycles. But obviously it would be very difficult to talk about everyone's individual menstrual cycle if you end up with lots of different people and different timings. So I thought, well, we'll do it around the lunar cycle, and I'll talk about how that reflects the energy of the menstrual cycle, because it does mirror it. So from the new moon would be reflective of your menstrual stage, your bleed, when energy is at its lowest and light is at its lowest, and you just feel like being kind of indoors and cozy and hibernating. A waxing moon would be spring, energy is starting to return. In spring, your follicular phase, when you're coming out of your bleed and heading towards ovulation, and estrogen is starting to rise in your body, and you're starting to feel a little bit more energetic, a little bit more playful. And then full moon is reflective of ovulation, when you're feeling most confident and outgoing and productive, and you kind of want to share your ideas with the world. And then as the moon wanes again, the energy starts to wane also, and the light starts to wane, would be reflective of the luteal phase. So post ovulation, when estrogen drops, progesterone starts to rise, and you just kind of want to hunker down, and kind of get back into that hibernation mode.
So in terms of the lunar cycle, do you talk about, because you can see the connection for people who are still menstruating, but for someone who is either going through perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopause, do you talk about how does it work in terms of connecting your lunar phase with whatever else is going on in your life?
So yeah, that's exactly it. When you're not having that menstrual cycle for whatever reason, if you're pregnant, breastfeeding, menopausal, or for whatever reason, having the lunar cycle to look to ensure that you're still taking time to rest, and that you're still kind of working on that cycle rather than working on a treadmill, is really important. So yes, I think that was. I've lost my train of thought again. Sorry.
So you were saying that for people who don't have a period for whatever reason, using the lunar cycle is a really nice way to rest, to remind yourself to rest, because you don't have that menstrual cycle to connect with. I think that's really interesting, because I get those questions a lot. Well, I talk about menstrual cycle tracking a lot, and people will say to me, "Oh, well, I take the pill, so I can't do this," or "I'm menopausal or postmenopausal. How does this work for me?" And I love that lunar cycle tracking as a tool, because again, it's a reminder to rest, and it's a reminder that we are still cyclical beings, even if we don't have a menstrual cycle for whatever reason. We need to rest. Rest is important. Rest is our right.
It is our right, yes. Yes, so exactly. It gives still gives women a way to kind of ground themselves, rather than going back to that kind of working every day in the same way. It's like, okay, so we're coming to the new moon, I'm going to schedule in a couple of days to just take a break and really kind of practice self-care. Yeah.
So if you had one thing to say to someone who's listening to this podcast, what would you want that to be? What would you want to leave them with?
Oh. Yeah, I think the most important thing is, to sound like a broken record, is resting and listening to your body. Again, so often we automatically fight against this idea of taking a break, and this fear of looking like we're not contributing and we're not being productive. I read the brilliant Untamed by Glennon Doyle, which I feel like almost everyone has read now. And if you haven't, I highly recommend it. She speaks about how, what we're all striving for is to be selfless, to kind of make ourselves disappear so much that we are seen as completely selfless. And this is like the epitome of being a good person, a good mother, a good woman. And I think that is so ingrained in us that we feel it's selfish of us to want to, like you say, sit down and read a book. But actually it's so important for our mental health, our physical health, to just keep ourselves rested, so we can carry on like keeping our brain firing on all cylinders and keep bringing our brilliant ideas to the world, and keep like looking after whoever we're giving care to, our children or our family or our community. We need to be rested in order to do those things.
That is such a brilliant message, and I really encourage all of my listeners to take that to heart. Rest is so powerful, and it's not necessarily just about being productive. It's also about feeling better in yourself and just feeling your best self, to quote Oprah. How can listeners find out more about you?
You can find out more about me on my website, which is sillyheart.co.uk, and I am Sillyheart Co, all one word, across pretty much every other social network going, and you'll most likely find me hanging out on Instagram.
and your Facebook group.
My Facebook group is Life Aligned, and it's a closed group, so everything you kind of share in there is just within the group, and it's such a friendly, warm, calming space. It's really lovely. Yes, you can find me on Facebook on Life Aligned. Yes.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Jen. It's so brilliant to talk with you, connect with you, and find out more about what you do.
Thank you so much for having me.
For more inspiring conversations, head over to periodstorypod.com, where we have so many more for you to peruse. If you want help with your menstrual or hormone health, email me on hello@eatlovemove.com to set up a free 30-minute hormone health review. If you like today's show, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Tag us, come say hi, and send in your requests for who you'd like to see on the show on Instagram and Twitter on @periodstorypod, or email us at hello@periodstorypod.com. I'm Lenise Brothers, and you've been listening to Period Story. Thank you so much for listening.